Well, there aren't many people who can say they've been Secretary of State both for Education and the Department for International Development. But I'm delighted to say Justine Greening, who can make that claim, joins us on the line. Good morning to you.
Morning, Nick.
Now, the Westminster Village tends to obsess about U-turns and humiliations and embarrassments. Don't the public simply care that Boris Johnson did the right thing? And if he was a bit slow about it, does it matter?
I think he did do the right thing in making his U-turn on free school meal vouchers. It was obvious last week to me that this was going to be the ultimate end point on that particular policy. I think the challenge for the government now is to bring forward a proper strategy on levelling up Britain overall. I know a lot of Conservative MPs care just as much about this as I do. And I think what we all want to see is a proper plan from government.
What wounds, of course, is the suggestion that Marcus Rashford, the United player, has a better sense of what families are going through up and down the country than Conservative ministers.
Well, I think there should be a post-mortem on how come a Premier League footballer was providing better advice to the Prime Minister than ministers and his wider government. There have been a number of U-turns over the last few weeks, and I think what it shows is that the government really needs to get on top of the current agenda it already has on its plate. And I think a lot of people seeing the DFID announcement yesterday simply couldn't understand how that could possibly be a priority when there isn't yet a schools plan in place for catching up children who've fallen behind, for getting children back into school in the autumn. There isn't an economic recovery plan yet in place for the millions of people who are effectively shadow unemployed on furlough schemes. There's no plan in place yet for 1 million young people who will be leaving education this summer and entering the jobs market. Those surely for all of us are the priorities that we want government totally focused on now.
You don't sound massively impressed by the leadership in the Department for Education, which you used to run.
I think I'm somebody who went to my local primary and secondary school, comprehensive school. Education utterly transformed my life. The thought that children now are unable to access education, I find utterly untenable. And this is a government that said it would do whatever it takes to make sure that households and businesses could cope with the coronavirus crisis. We now need that same level of urgency and ambition from the government on getting young people back into education and supporting young people who are going to be in the jobs market come the autumn, wanting to take the next steps on starting a career.
Let's be clear on your position on the Department for International Development. You said it was a distraction from that great list of things that you said needed to be done. But do you actually think it's a bad idea? David Cameron was very, very clear about it, along with Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, saying it was a bad idea because it would lessen the focus on international aid and would increase the sense that trade was being traded for aid in international relations.
I always recognise there are arguments on both sides of the argument on whether DFID is a standalone department or not. What I wasn't clear on yesterday was exactly the strategy that the Prime Minister was bringing forward in relation to international aid. If it was about stopping the cash point in the sky, it wasn't clear to me why there was a stopping of the 0.7% commitment. That remains in place, which I think is a sensible idea. If it was about how aid is spent, then there's absolutely no need for a reorganisation of government departments. It's just simply a matter of a Prime Minister telling a Secretary of State running that department that he wants more aid spent in certain countries and less aid spent in others. That's just a question of strategy. And I think on all of this, what people need to understand is what's the overall game plan from the government and how, in particular, are they going to make people's lives better by bringing forward a strategy on levelling up.
Justine Greening, thank you for joining us.